Hi, I'm Kat, and today I have for you a true crime case. I will also be doing my makeup at the same time, and of course I also have a Romanian word for you. So let's start with the word, which is vampir. 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 Well done, guys, you just said vampire. And just a disclaimer, a quick one here, I used articles in Polish language translated with, of course, our friend Google Translate, so I can't really say with 100% certainty that there are no errors in the translation. Okay, so I'm gonna start right off here. I have no idea why this guy is nicknamed the vampire, because naturally, I had questions about him, and so I googled and googled, and he's done nothing that would give him this name, right? I mean, when you read about a case, you kind of expect some gruesome stuff there, right? The vampire, like maybe something to do with sucking blood or biting or whatever, but I mean, why did this killer get that name? Or will we figure this out by the end of the video? I'm not sure. Leszek Pękalski is one of the most famous Polish killers. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for manslaughter. But how many victims did he actually murder? Leszek Pękalski was born on February 12, 1966 in Osieki near Bytów, Poland. He was born as a baby out of wedlock as a result of an affair between his mother and a neighbor. His mother, Cecilia Pękalska, was a farm worker. Leszek was born from a twin pregnancy with his sister. Being born out of wedlock, his mother couldn't really accept him, and instead of taking care of her son, she preferred to drink every single day. She was actually an alcoholic. She chose the company of vodka instead of her own son, and without dedicating any time to looking after Leszek, his grandmother actually ended up taking care of him. Now, there are a lot of components around this whole situation, if you will. It was the 60s, they lived in a village, they were also Catholics, according to some other articles. Cecilia got pregnant after she was raped, but I'm not sure whether it was the rape or the affair that she had with a married neighbor which resulted in the pregnancy. Also, it's very important to note that Cecilia, throughout her pregnancy, she was heavily drinking. Even when she was working, she would still be drinking. The village knew that she loved alcohol, and the village was talking. They were talking. Everybody was talking. It was a small village, and like in a small village, everybody knew each other, especially after the babies were born. Here you have a single mother. On top of it, she's also an alcoholic, and people will be talking. Apart from that, when the babies were born, Leszek, it was very clear that something was not quite right with his health. He was moving his head very weirdly, and all in all, he was not a really healthy baby, and it's speculated that he was actually born with fetal alcohol syndrome. Now, people born with the syndrome can have problems with learning, memory, attention span, communication, vision, or hearing. And on top of that, babies born with the syndrome, they have significant distinctive facial features such as small eyes, flat mid-face, a small head, and these are very visual and quite noticeable. Cecilia, his mother, she would show love and affection to Leszek's twin sister. She would hold her in her arms, cuddle her, play with her. But she never did these things with Leszek. She just couldn't accept him. She didn't really want him. It was clear as soon as he was born that he was born disabled. Cecilia was ashamed with him. And then you also have all of these neighbors who have an extra reason to gossip, and the family are now suddenly outcasts. But even when his grandmother takes care of him, it doesn't really get any better, because his grandmother was also an alcoholic. Both his mother and grandmother, they were actually abusive towards the children, but mostly towards Leszek. They didn't really take any care of him. He would always be hungry, so hungry that he would end up crying. He always looked so dirty and smelly, and he just never looked properly looked after. Being scared, he would often hide in the barn. Leszek really liked fire, in particular using the fire poker at his grandmother's house. But his grandmother, she would be so angry at him for playing with fire, so angry that she once took the hot fire poker and burned his hand with it on purpose. When Leszek went to the local school in the village, everybody knew who he was and who his mother was. He had a limp, a funny walk, and he was always being bullied for the way that he looked, for his disability, and also for his mother being an alcoholic. So when he was around 11 years old, social services became involved and he was taken into a care home. He then attended a special needs school, but sadly it didn't really get any better for him. Again, being vulnerable, he would be picked on by the older kids at the school to the point where he was even sexually assaulted. He later told the psychiatrist that he was forced into a sexual encounter with two older boys who actually assaulted him. They took him in the bathroom, and whilst one was holding him, the other started touching his private area. As a child, he didn't really have the love, affection, and attention or even education that his mother should have given him. He didn't have any father figure either. His mother and grandmother would abuse him and be violent towards him. So he grew up thinking that, he can get anything that he wants if he uses violence. He didn't have morals or ethics because no one was really a positive figure in his life. He also had this idea, and he actually grew up with this idea, that he needs to get married so he can have sex. For him, marriage was entitlement to sex. He needed a wife, and he spoke and thought about it so often that it actually became an obsession. As he grew up, all he would ask people would be, if they know a girl, because he wants a girlfriend, and he wants to get married so that he can have sex. Whilst still a young boy, Leszek was known to take his frustration out on the animals in the village. He would kick cats around and he would hurt dogs. Allegedly, as a child, he even strangled a cat. And he took great pleasure and gave him satisfaction when he would see people in the village beheading chickens and slaughtering pigs. He actually enjoyed this. When he was 14 years old, he actually fell in love with a disabled girl at his school. He was so in love with her that he actually asked her parents if they allow her to marry him, but of course the parents refused. And this was yet another rejection for him. By the age of 15, he couldn't control his sexual desires anymore. He began harassing girls and women, but they wouldn't really look at him because of his disability. He also looked rough, dirty, smelly, and really generally unkempt. His obsession with marrying to have sex grew even more as time went on. When he is 18 years old, Leszek finishes vocational school and actually finishes his training as a bricklayer, and he gets a job on a construction site. But he wouldn't be able to keep his job for very long. He is really at this point getting out of control. He starts harassing people at work. He ended up harassing a worker and he just wouldn't stop. It got so bad that the male worker almost got into a fight with him. But he made complaints, and Leszek, because of his behavior not being able to control himself, actually lost his job. So at the age of 21, he ends up jobless and he lives on his disability benefits, staying at home. I think that he was at this point living with his mother again. Maybe hoping that, she would at least now show him some affection, but sadly she never did. When his mother died in 1988 of a heart attack, it said that Leszek wasn't really affected by it, which, if you think about it, is quite understandable because he was abused by her throughout his youth. But again, now that his mother died, he's alone. Now he's also homeless, so he goes on to eventually live with his uncle. His uncle was the last one to take care of him, but sadly, just like Cecilia, his mother, and his grandmother, his uncle would often drink as well, and he wasn't really able to take care of Leszek. Even at this point, Leszek is still obsessed with getting married. So much so that he starts sending letters to various dating agencies, making his uncle really angry that he spent so much money on stamps by sending the letters. But he was rejected from these agencies as well. Yet another rejection. There was though one letter that he got a response to, and he was actually supposed to meet with this girl, but when he told her in a letter that, you know, he's disabled and he's on benefits, she just replied calling him stupid and just making fun of him. Because of his disability, Leszek was really struggling socially. He tried to be part of a community, but when he was young, other children would laugh at him or run away from him. Leszek dreamed of finding love and having a wife, but he wasn't really able to get any woman to fall in love with him because they would rather feel sorry for him because of his disability, or they would just tease him just like the other kids when he was in school, or just, you know, avoid him completely altogether. Even though he did have a disability, Leszek was able to perform very demanding tasks. After he turned 18, he traveled around Poland and he got himself a few jobs, like, you know, I already mentioned. But sadly, wherever he would go, he would always be rejected by people. He couldn't really find any friends, anyone that he could socialize with. Leszek was quite shy, but he was also rejected and he was unwanted by others. Although he looked like an adult on the outside, on the inside he was always this fearful child. His life ambitions were quite small as well, although, you know, that's, you can't really say that's always a bad thing. I mean, usually you can't get disappointed by something that you didn't really aim for to begin with, but you couldn't do, right? I would say that sometimes it's like, you know, kind of self-preservation. Whilst he was living with his uncle, Leszek would sometimes disappear for days from the apartment, and when he would return, his uncle wouldn't even ask him where he's been. Leszek liked to ride the train, and he would often simply spend the night in the forest. During a later psychiatric evaluation, psychiatrist examining him said that he suffers from mental retardation, which is a horrible word to begin with, but that's what the doctor said. And he also suffered from sexual dysfunction. His drive was so huge that Leszek had absolutely no inhibitions from immediately satisfying his needs. So he would do anything to get sexual stuff going. Local nuns taking care of the center for disabled girls have said that Leszek tried to get inside there as well. Although he was Catholic, Leszek actually gave up his religion and he joined Jehovah's Witnesses, but you know, it wasn't because of the faith, but rather because the attractive and young girls who were going to the meetings. This would have been very different for Leszek, because in the Catholic Church he wouldn't really have access to all of these girls. Here he would kind of get to spend time with others, socialize, but he was still unable to find a girl or even a friend. The first time that Leszek was truly noticed by people was in the 1990s. By this point, Leszek was already 28 years old. Can you just imagine for a second here, being 28 years old, no friends, no affection from anywhere, bullied, being an outcast wherever you go, not having a girlfriend, not having that kind of intimacy and connection, being rejected ever since you were a baby. To me, that just sounds completely heartbreaking. 17-year-old Sylvia R. was working at a store. Leszek knew her from the store, which was in the neighborhood. He went to the store, begging her for food. Seeing his disability, she actually felt quite sorry for him, so she told him that after she finishes her shift, she would bring some food over for him to the forest. Leszek would sometimes spend the night in a forest nearby between Jezirs and Darskovo. They decided to meet up in a secluded area in this forest. Sylvia took some food for Leszek in that area. They started, getting into a conversation. He shared with her all of his problems, and he really believed at this point that he finally found someone who understood him and he had a connection with. Leszek straight away asked Sylvia to marry him and also, of course, to have sex. But she got quite scared and she actually refused. However, she did laugh at him. She was laughing and, telling him that she wouldn't be with someone so stupid like him. She wanted to leave the forest quickly, but Leszek got really angry and wouldn't let her go. He just hated when people would laugh at him and make fun of him. He hit Sylvia so hard that he ended up killing her instantly. She suffered multiple blows to her head. After killing her, he raped her. He left her in the forest and throughout the night he would keep going back and raping her. In June 1991, police in Bytów received a report that the body of 17-year-old Sylvia was found in the forest. She was actually found by her parents, who went out looking for her because they were worried about her sudden disappearance. She had finished her shift, but she'd never returned home, and she was their only daughter. So a homicide investigation was launched, but no one was identified at the time, and after 1 year of searching with no results, the case was dropped. In 1992, 40-year-old Bernadetta was raped. Her attacker was wearing his jumper over his face, but the woman actually recognized his voice. So she told police straight away who he was. He was Leszek, who was quite well known from the neighboring village. Bernadetta was taking a shortcut to get home quicker in the evening when Leszek attacked her and told her that if she doesn't do what he wants, he's going to kill her. So he dragged her in a bush and raped her. Bernadetta actually pretended to be dead, hoping that someone will find her and save her. And Bernadetta actually survived. So Leszek was arrested, and in November 1992 he was sentenced to 2 years in prison, suspended for the attack and rape of Bernadetta. However, he didn't spend any time in prison because the court ruled that Leszek was insane at the time of the crime. So you have, Sylvia, the 17-year-old, who was murdered by Leszek, but her case went cold. Then you have the rape of Bernadetta, for which Leszek didn't get any prison time. So, he's free, right? He must be feeling quite good at this point. He's done some horrible things, but he's getting no punishment. And remember that throughout this time, he's traveling all over Poland. And all over Poland, there are women, men, and children sexually assaulted and killed, and their murders are unsolved. Nobody knows who the killer is. But by complete accident, something happened in December 1992. Leszek is arrested on suspicion of murdering the 17-year-old Sylvia. It turns out that right before they closed down the investigation into Sylvia's murder because of lack of any leads, police was actually at least trying to narrow down the suspects list. They managed to create a criminal profile of the suspect. He was supposed to be a brutal and sexually unsatisfied man. A secretary working in the district prosecutor's office in Bytów transferred suspect's files to the office when she came across Leszek and his suspended sentence for rape. And now you remember Bernadetta's rape, where she actually managed to escape. The secretary made a connection with the murder and rape of the 17-year-old girl Sylvia. So she presented her theory to her superiors and they decided to check Leszek's alibi. It turned out that the secretary was right because Leszek actually confessed to killing Sylvia. So it should have been an open and shut case, right? But it was far from it. Leszek confessed to 69 murders to investigators. He allegedly murdered victims all over Poland. Investigators examining his life confirmed that he actually traveled a lot. It was during this time that he allegedly committed dozens of murders. According to his story, he strangled and raped a woman in Torun. He also stole a pram with a child in Bialystok, undressed the baby girl lying in it, and left her in the cold. From Leszek's story, only the killer could know all of the details of the crimes that he was describing. He remembered the color of his victims' underwear and the decorations in the victims' apartments where he killed them. Police actually took him to a victim's house for a reconstruction, and when he saw the room, he said that the wall was different. It was a different color with a different pattern when he was there. These are details that only the killer would actually know. He arranged the bodies after each murder, and from his story, the police drew up a terrifying map of the crimes. Now, we need to remember that Leszek was looking for attention from people since he was a young boy. He was always ignored, marginalized, teased, and simply abandoned. Now, after his arrest, he finally has people listening to him, paying attention to him, and finding out exactly who Leszek is. He's not invisible anymore. He suddenly began to arouse the interest of all people. After being rejected, by a society that constantly ignored him, he finally became somebody. People talked about him. He was visited by journalists and even producers of TV documentaries. He was the center of attention, and I'm sure that he just loved it. Because, throughout his life, he's never had this before. Throughout the duration of the criminal proceedings, Leszek was placed in a detention center where he began to keep a diary. In this diary, he described in detail almost 70 crimes that he told investigators about. But the twist here is that many of them didn't really match up with reality. For example, he confessed to 2 crimes committed on the same day in 2 different parts of Poland, which is kind of unrealistic and impossible. It later turned out that other prisoners advised him to interfere with the criminal investigation. But also he realized that he could get the death penalty if he confesses to all of these crimes. First he confessed to the crime, then at the last moment he recanted his testimony. Leszek actually recanted most of his words before the court. He also said that it was the police officers who forced him to say a lot of things allegedly in exchange for food and alcohol. He said, quote, "I'm a gullible man and I was easily persuaded by what the officers have told me. I am mentally weak and if somebody pushes me, I break down. Then I admit to things I have never done. I have never killed anyone. I'm so scared." The prosecutor threatened that the victims' families or the public would kill me if I'm acquitted or get a mild sentence. He yelled at me and told me to confess everything, end of quote. So in the end, only one murder, the teenager Sylvia, was proven to be him, which he admitted. What is the exact numbers of victims of the vampire of Bytów? Sadly, no one knows to this day. It is known, however, that in 1996, Leszek Pękalski was sentenced to 25 years in prison. People living in Bytów were very scared of what would happen at the end of his sentence when he's released. They were terrified, thinking that he will return to live in his uncle's house. But before the end of his sentence, the court decided that Leszek could still pose a real threat to society. So it was decided that pursuant to the so-called Beasts Act, he was placed in a closed center in Gostynin. The prosecutor's office actually tried to connect him to 17 murders committed between 1984 and 1992, but they only managed to prove one, 17-year-old Sylvia from Darskov, for which he was sentenced. From 2007 he was able to apply for parole, and he did this every year, but the team of therapists gave a negative opinion on his applications. He served his sentence in the remand prison in Starogard, Gdańsk. This ended on December 11, 2017. At that time, he was placed in a closed center in Gostynin on the basis of a separate act for this type of cases, called by the media, like I said, the Beast Act. This was introduced on 22nd of November 2013 on proceedings against people with mental disorders posing a threat to the life, health, or sexual freedom of other people. The Act introduced two new post-penal and indefinite measures: preventive supervision and placement in the National Center for the Prevention of Dissocial Behavior. The center is monitored, protected, and also provides therapy. It consists of 6 treatment and rehabilitation departments. Each person staying there has an individual therapy plan. Any personal items belonging to a person posing a threat can be checked at any time. The person has the right, with the consent of the head of the center, to call, email, and have personal contact with other people. If the head of the center doesn't agree, the person has the right to contact his or her own representative, the patient's rights ombudsman of the psychiatric hospital, and the ombudsman for citizens' rights. The staff at the center are obliged to maintain the secrecy of data and information about any people there. The people staying there have the right to report verbally and in writing complaints about the violation of their rights, and they also have the right to be informed about decisions in any matters concerning them. Direct coercion can be used against the individual, which can consist of holding, forcible use of medicine, wearing belts or a straitjacket, isolation or using handcuffs, a service baton or a hand thrower or baton, or a hand thrower, or incapacitating substances. The Act regulates in detail the use of direct coercion and requires its documentation each time. At least once every 6 months, the court determines the legitimacy of a person's further stay in the center based on the psychiatrist's opinion and the result of the therapy. The court can at any time decide to discharge a person from the center, and discharge with continued supervision is possible. If the probability of committing a prohibited act specified in the act by the person under supervision increases to the very high level, the court can decide to place the supervised person in the center indefinitely. Leszek actually once asked the warden's permission to let him keep a rubber sex shop doll in his detention cell. He wasn't allowed to get the sex doll, so he appealed to the government citizens' rights representative and was at one point awaiting the decision. Sources say that he has put on a lot of weight in jail, and he was hopeful to soon find a girl in the flesh or made out of rubber. At the end of Leszek Pękalski's sentence, the regional prosecutor's office in Gdańsk and the undetected crimes team of the investigation and investigation department of the provincial police headquarters in Gdańsk returned to his case, investigating crimes from the past and using new forensic techniques in the field to examine any traces or evidence to possibly link him to more crimes for which a suspect has not been found. During the course of the case, police made mistakes and they actually lost key evidence by relying on Leszek's testimony to conduct the criminal investigation, which Leszek then recounted before the trial. DNA evidence was crucial for the prosecutor's case, but it was revealed that police mishandled hair strands during the investigation and they lost evidential value. Leszek's victims were extremely diverse: men, women, children, and even an infant. Most often, he tortured his victims to death and raped them before and after death. Leszek would go on a few-day lonely train journeys around Poland, during which, according to investigators, he began to rape and murder. Prosecutors accused Leszek of strangling, knifing, bludgeoning, or kicking his victims to death and then raping them. Some believe that Leszek was the product of a rape in the small village of Osieki and that his mother was destroyed by this experience and wanted nothing to do with her son. Others said, like I mentioned, that he was the child of an illegitimate affair with a married man. Leszek spent most of his childhood homeless, in orphanages, or living with his grandmother, experiencing physical violence everywhere. Neighbors said that he always looked malnourished and bruised. From an early age, Leszek dreamed of a wife and struggled with his sexuality and rejection of his advances. And this, guys, is the story of the vampire of Bytów. I mean, why was he named that? I still don't feel like this name suits him. What do you guys think? Also, on one hand, I have to be honest, and let's all be adults here. I kind of feel sorry for him. He had a horrible life since even before he was born. He was isolated, he was alone, lonely, unloved, neglected, abused, bullied, ridiculed, all of those things. I do feel sorry for him, but when it comes to killing children and infants, no. I just can't have that. And when it comes to killing another human being, there is absolutely no excuse in this entire world. However, I do agree that he does belong in that center, and I also agree that he should never be allowed to leave. I think as long as he is alive, he will be a danger to society if he is let out, and maybe he shouldn't get that sex doll either. And I also believe him when he says that he killed 69 people. He had a decade to do that, plus he was traveling all over Poland. All of those murders with the sexual motives were never solved. And the only reason he actually got caught for Sylvia's murder was because her parents found her body. Bernadetta recognized his voice. I mean, if he was traveling all over Poland, no one would have been able to make any kind of connection to him. He would be gone before anyone even would be able to make any kind of connection to him. And yeah, this is the story of the vampire of Bytów. And like I said, yes, I do feel sorry for him because of his messed up childhood. But like I said, and I'm gonna repeat it again, so you guys don't, misunderstand what I'm trying to say. Nothing in this whole world excuses for you to kill another human being. Unless, of course, you are defending yourself, which, it's something that it's in the human nature. You are defending yourself however you can in that moment, right? And if that ends up, killing someone at the end of it, it's self-defense, right? But not in the way that he did it, because he didn't act in self-defense. He just did it because he did it. I don't know, he was just messed up. He was a messed up man. And I believe that his rejection throughout his childhood had a lot to do with, over time, getting very affected by people laughing at him and rejected him. And I guess that he probably felt that he's in control when he does this. That could be a reason why he decided that he's going to rape his victims after killing them. And like in Sylvia's case, he went over and over again after he killed her throughout the night in the forest and raped her repeatedly. I guess that probably he felt that that's the only time where he can have control of the situation and where he can't really be rejected, and kind of like get some kind of pleasure from it. It's just horrible. But yes, I'm rambling here again. But yes, I do think that he had as many victims as he said, 69 of them, because he, like I said, he had all of these opportunities and he was traveling all over the place. And by the time anybody would catch up with a murder, he would be long gone. So yeah, please guys, do let me know what do you think in the comment section down below. For now, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!